And Meteor. This is the Meteor setup for Torment 11. This setup assumes that you have found the Nilfur's boots and the Halo of Carini. So those two items you will have to have if you're going to run this specific configuration. I will go over some alternates in a little bit. Just know that that's what you will have to have found before this point to run this particular build. Let's see. This particular setup is the magic weapon Ignite, so it's really easy to ignite enemies, which is the benefit. It is the fastest setup I found simply because it's so easy to ignite enemies. The high proc rate on Arcane Torrent procs your magic weapons so much quicker, and then of course your automatic casts will still proc that fire bonus and get you the 6-piece from the Firebird set. We're wearing the Nilfurs in this setup. That will save you an extra roll. You will not have to cube them, basically, in season, and that will save the materials up front early season, which is quite nice. And another reason this setup is really kind of sweet, if you think about it. Of course, if you find both the Grand Vizier and the Etch Sigil, then you would want to cube your Nilfurs, because you could use the Grand Vizier in the cube, and you could wear, I guess if you found a second Etch Sigil, you could wear your Etch Sigil. But progression for our build, remember our starter build cubes the Etch Sigil, so we're going to run with that, using the Etch Sigil in the cube, and the Nilfurs should be able to run T11 just fine. I've got Nilfurs in the cube because I was testing like this, because my Nilfurs are ancient. I didn't want to skew any sort of results. But just keep in mind that you would be wearing them in the setup, and then you would have these, I guess, you would have two, cube rolls free from the beginning of season still, which is quite nice. Let's see. Resource in this build provided by Arcanaut, quite nice. Extra damage from Audacity, double revive, quite good this early on. This particular setup is a little less defensive because all we have is the Carini and Blur. So less defensive than some of my other setups, but that's because it's expected that you're going to run a little bit of life on hit with this setup for recovery, kind of keep you in balance, and also that you're going to use your Calamity to stun mobs and crowd control. It's very important that you do this, but there is enough resource in the build, as you can see, that you can still channel and stun with your Calamity every now and then, assuming we still have the Aetherwalker in the setup, so it's very mobile, highly mobile with the run speed from Illusionist. It's quite a nice setup, but there is enough resource that you can either move around with Teleport as you're engaged and still cast your Etch Sigil Meteors, or if you're more stationary at the time and closer up and not getting hit quite so much, you can even manually cast every so often and still maintain resource, which is quite nice. Get you some extra damage there. Okay, first of all, let's go over what you're going to want for this build. You're going to want a resource gem in the helmet, topaz in the helmet, and then keep that resource roll on the shoulder. Firebird's pinions roll with RCR by default, so just keep that on the item. And then that should give you, when you include Paragon, close to 27% RCR. You could opt in Paragon to split it a little bit, so you could roll like maybe 30% here and 20% here. I'm assuming 200 Paragon at this point, so that would give you a little bit extra life on hit, which would be quite nice for this setup as well. And as you can see, we did not go down that much as far as resources concerned, so while I found this setup to be best, you may not find a Carini in season. Maybe you found an Ashnagars instead of the Carini. So we're going to go over a few setups that used Ashnagars instead of the Carini. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to use Energy Armor, either Force Armor or Prismatic Armor. I've been kind of preferring Prismatic this early on, but you could go Force Armor if you want. That would give you that extra armor boost, which is quite nice this early in the season. to get that extra reduction. And then you would slot deflection. We would use galvanizing ward. We would use astral presence as our resource instead of Arcanaut. So it's a little bit, it doesn't have quite as much resource regeneration in this setup because we have to swap this out for black hole. Actually, this would be if you had didn't have the Creanie, so we're going to go explosive blast, chain reaction. This is assuming that instead of the Creanie, you have found the Orb of Infinite Depth through your blood shard rolls on source, but you don't have the Creanie yet. You could run this variation instead. Uses Galvanizing Ward for that huge shield in combination with the Ashnagars and the Orb of Infinite Depth for damage reduction. It's a little bit more touch and go because your Etch Sigil will cast Explosive Blast every so often, and you do have to be close to enemies as well, so it can be a little bit more dangerous. That's why I prefer the safe passage on this setup instead of Calamity, just to get that extra damage reduction in combination with the shielding. And this particular build, if you were dropping the Creanie and going with the Orb of Infinite Depth, I recommend Vitality. Try and get some extra Vitality rolls just to get that extra shielding. Anyway, this is a good setup as well. You're able to... one of the negatives is you have to get up close to the elites, but it still works as far as being able to do T11. It's a little bit slower, but it works. So, one more quick thing about that alternate setup with the Ashnagars and the Orb of Infinite Depth. Another downside is you would have to wear all 6 pieces of Firebird, so you would have to cube the Nilfers in this setup, simply because you did not find the Creanie, which is another downside, but you should still have enough materials to do that if you're going this route. So let's briefly cover progression path for the Meteor build. You would have already cubed the Etch Sigil from our previous section. You would have gotten the Aether Walker from upgrade rare using your Death's Breath. You might have rolled shards on source, so you might be running this configuration instead. With the, you may not have found the Halo of Creanie, so you may be running the alternate setup. There are a couple ways you could go from this point. You could, I think you would want to roll your blood shards on bracers, just to get the Nemesis bracers, would increase progression through your rifts quite a bit. You could also go for belts. That would give you either the Hergbrash's Binding or the Gold Wrap if you are lucky enough to have a Boon of the Hoarder already. Gold Wrap is a good synergy with that item. It would give you a lot of defense, which is kind of what this build needs. You could also upgrade rare on staves to be able to complete the Nilfers Grand Vizier Etch Sigil Trinity. I got one right here. So you would wear the Etch Sigil, you'd put the Nilfers both boots in the cube, and then you could run the Grand Vizier in the cube. Once you've found that item through upgrade rare, this would boost the power of the build in quite a lot. And of course, if you had the increased Gold Wrap Hoarder combo, you could go a little bit higher, get more Death's Breath. But regardless of what you choose, I would definitely be rolling upgrade rare on pants at that point, just to get the Tal set. And then you could, once you start getting those Tal set pants through the upgrade rare recipe, you could then use the convert set items, Skill of Nilfer recipe, to convert those pants into the various items of Tal Rasha, and transition smoothly into the Tal Lightning Meteor build.